Hi, I'm Cathy Doone. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I'm 52 years old, and recently I had open heart surgery. You're going to probably see me make faces, make sounds, do goofy things when I feel like I look silly on this recording. My granddaughter is also in the background, so you may hear her. I'm going to pause it right now because I'm not sure what I'm going to say next. Okay, here goes. Oops, there's the granddaughter in the background. So, 5 to 7 years ago, I wasn't feeling myself. I was short of breath. I was just tired all the time. And as you can see, I'm not a little gal, but I have always been active. I've always been able to keep up. And just all of a sudden, I couldn't. I didn't know if it was my age or if it was, my weight catching up to me, but I thought it was worth a trip in to see my doctor. So I went and see my family doctor, and he agreed with me that it wasn't how I typically was. Growing up, and I get it, I'm 52, I said that already, but growing up, I was very active. I was always into sports, and if you ever needed to find me, look on a ball field, and there I was. But he agreed that it was worth looking into, so he mentioned a heart scan to me, and he said that typically insurance didn't pay for it, but it was only $90. It was just going to be a CT, no big deal. So I agreed, and we got me scheduled. So I had the CT, and a few days later, I got a call from my family doctor, and he did say that something was found on the scan, and it looked like I might have an aneurysm. Well, at that time, I had not really heard of an aneurysm. Sure, I've heard of them, but I didn't really know what it was. So right away, I jumped on the internet and freaked myself out. My doctor's always joked with me and said, do I want Dr. Google or do I want him? But I do think there's a lot of information on the internet, but I also think you can scare yourself too. So he said that after talking to a cardiologist that they thought I should have, whoopsie, she's over there playing, having fun. But they thought that I should have a CT with the dye contrast. So we got that scheduled. Had to wait several weeks and, read everything I could find. And so my daughter took me to get that first CT with dye contrast. We had to drive like 70 miles to get to it because at the time insurance said that's what I had to do. I live really close to a major hospital here in Columbus, Ohio, but had to go to a little town. So we had the test. I did the CT, and like everybody else, you try to get the technician to tell you something, and they say, oh, we can't tell you anything. It's got to be read by the doctors. Well, this technician actually said to me, wow, that's a big aneurysm. Yep, wow, that's a big aneurysm. So I was obviously freaked out. So the whole drive home, I'm like just freaking out. I go to my mom and dad's, and I'm sitting there, and I've convinced myself that I'm having chest pains. This is a big aneurysm. I'm having chest pains. So I called my family doctor, and I said, could that dye have caused me to have chest pains? And he said, no, I don't think so. Why don't you go on over to the emergency room? So I went to the emergency room, and like any time when you go into the emergency room, if you say you're having chest pains, they get you in right away. And they did an EKG. They didn't see anything, but they said, because I told them I had recently been diagnosed with an aneurysm, they said, let's do another CT to see if anything's happened. So in the hospital that day, they did do another CT, and it was also with dye contrast. And one thing I, have to say about that is, they warn you, you'll get that warm feeling all through you, and you do. And it feels weird, and it almost freaked me out a little bit, almost a little panic attack there, but it was okay. And so they then took me back into my room. Bless you, baby. They took me back into my room, and the doctor come in, and he said he'd be getting the results here pretty soon, and he'd come back in and talk to me. Well, he come back in, and before he come back in, I called everybody. I called my mama and dad, and I called my daughter, my son. I sent text messages to people I work with, my family down south. My husband was there, but I was convinced I was going to have open heart surgery that day or the next day. So anyway, he comes back in and he says, well, Cathy, I've got good news for you. He said, your aneurysm hasn't grown much in 10 years. It's hardly grown at all. And I said, I just found out about it a few weeks ago when I had the first CT. And he said, well, maybe there was a typo, because I think it was 2014 when all this was happening. And he said back in 2004. And he said, so let me go take another look. And so he come back in and he said, you were in the hospital back in 2004 for a blood clot in your shoulder. And when they did the scan, I'm going to pause right here. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. My grandbaby needed her diaper changed. So, like I was saying, the doctor come in and he said that when I was in the hospital back in 2004, I had a blood clot in my shoulder. When they had looked at that, they had saw the aneurysm and noted it, but they forgot to tell me, and they forgot to tell my family doctor. So, I did stay overnight because of chest pains, but then the next day I got out. My family doctor said he'd be setting me up with a cardiologist. He set me up, and actually the first doctor I went and seen about my heart, other than the family doctor, was a cardiac surgeon. And he told me that my aneurysm, at the time, both scans had said like 4.7, 4.8. And that's where it was at. It hadn't changed in 10 years. He said in some cases it doesn't change. And you just watch and wait. So I was put on the watch and wait. 6 months later, they did another CT scan with the dye contrast, and it showed about the same thing. It might have went up a smidge, but about the same thing. But I was struggling a little bit, being out of breath and everything. So he did schedule me for an echo to see if anything else was going on, and I think also to determine what my aortic valve looked like. So after the echo, they could not really get a good view of my aortic valve, so they sent me for another test where they put a camera down my throat and went in so they could see my heart from there. And it was determined that I had a bicuspid aortic valve, which from what I've read and what I was told, when you do have a bicuspid valve, your aneurysm can grow quicker. And so, with mine already being at like 4.9, it did make me worry. But I went back to the cardiac surgeon, and he said, it just really ain't growing. So we're going to keep you on the watch and wait. And we're going to look at it every 6 months. But live your life. Do what you do. And so that would happen after my 6 months scan and nothing had changed. I would go back to exercising. I was doing spinning classes, just doing what I do. And but then when it would come close to getting another 6 month scan, I would start sort of thinking, should I be doing this stuff? Oh, what if it's grown? What could happen? And so I went and had another one, and basically same sort of thing. It hadn't changed. Went and saw the cardiac surgeon, and he said, it's still not changing. And he did comment about my size at that point and said that he just didn't know if I would tolerate a surgery because, I was overweight and everything. And but since it wasn't changing, he said it may never change, and I could live like this and just, and then he said something about not checking it for like a year, and that really sort of made me nervous. And I went and saw my family doctor, and he said, Kathy, that cardiac surgeon doesn't know you. Yeah, you're overweight, but you're a healthy overweight. He said, I'm going to call him because you're in the, decent enough shape. You could tolerate this surgery and everything. So they talked, and he basically talked my family doctor into thinking, yeah, it wouldn't grow and we could wait and nothing would happen. So I did tell him I didn't want to wait a whole year, though. I wanted to still do the 6-month scans. I was too scared to wait a whole year. And he said, okay, we'll do one more 6-month scan. And at that point, if it's not changed, we'll put you out. And I said, okay. So I had the 6-month scan. And I got the call for my follow-up appointment. And they said that doctor was no longer there, and that there is a new doctor that would see me. And, I was starting to get to where I sort of wanted a second opinion. So I was, I hate to say it, sort of glad. So I met the new doctor. And right away I liked him. The other doctor never did hear what happened to him. Uh-oh, the baby's crying. So, oh, wait, she stopped. Anyway, so I met him. I liked him. He said that he did not agree that it was going to possibly stay the same forever. He felt like I'd be on a 1 to 5 year plan, and that I would have the surgery, and he would have me do scans periodically, the 6-month thing. And so that's what we did. I think I had another scan, and it stayed the same. And then the summer of 2018, things changed. I didn't even really notice it. I mean, I did notice it. I was not myself, but I really didn't put it together that it was my heart. I spend a lot of time in the summer in the swimming pool. I enjoy relaxing in a pool, floating in a pool. That summer I did it, but wasn't the same. One time I had an episode, and looking back, it should have been an eye-opener, and it wasn't. Okay, all the other stuff was recorded yesterday, and I'm going to finish up and tell the rest of my story today. I wanted to back up and talk about when I was diagnosed with having the bicuspid aortic valve. I started, digging, doing some research about that, and I came across Karen when she was doing the videos with, I think his name's Dr. Prakash, and I asked the question about the bicuspid valve because I also had a child that was born back in 1992, and she had tetralogy fallot, a heart defect. And I just was curious if they were linked. At the time when I had her, they said no, there was no genetic connection at all. But we didn't know I had heart problems back then either. So Dr. Prakash, and I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong, he said that they were starting to do research on whether tetralogy and other heart defects were linked. I did get in contact with the John Ritter Foundation for genetic testing. I've not done the testing yet because my son feels like it would be tough on me to find out that it was genetically tested, because my daughter did later pass away in her open heart surgery to fix her heart defect, and so he doesn't feel it's something that I could handle well. So I'm still kicking that around. I probably will do it, but as of now I haven't done it. Okay, so summer of 2018, like I said, I just wasn't feeling like myself. I was busy that summer because I was planning my daughter's wedding. I was, like I said, floating in a pool. But I mentioned I had a spell. And by that, what I mean was I was at the pool one day at a friend's house, and I just got really dizzy every time I stood up. I just, the it's like everything would spin and everything. So it concerned me. I stayed at her house for a while. They offered to drive me home. They offered to follow me home, but I'm one of those people that I tend to not like to ask people for help. I know it's silly, but that's me. Anyway, it only happened when I'd stand up, but it lasted for like an hour or so. But when I felt up to it, I did drive home, continued planning my daughter's wedding. Later in the summer, we found out she was pregnant with that grandchild you hear in the background. We had her wedding. Everything went great. This time last year, right after her wedding, I drove my parents to the Georgia-Florida game in Jacksonville. And when I got back in town, I just, still something was bugging me about how I felt. So I got with my doctor again, and they said, well, let's do a stress test. So we set that up, and I did a stress test. I did the medical, or the medicine stress test. I didn't walk on the treadmill. They injected me with something that, forced my heart to think I was working out or walking or exerting myself. And so when the results come back from that, I felt it. So then they decided they were going to do a heart catheter and see what was going on. When I talked to my doctor about the heart catheter, he had told me when he was in there, he would maybe do a stent or something because of the stress test and me failing it. But he, said it depends on what he saw when he got in there and everything. So I went for the stress test. But before I did reach out to the groups and ask people, what's involved in a catheter, and all that stuff. And, I remember being told it's easy peasy. And I do typically believe it's easy peasy. But for some reason with me, easy peasy isn't always easy peasy. So anyway, the day I arrived at the hospital for my heart catheter, they prepped me, got me ready. The doctor came in and he said, before we do the heart catheter, why don't we send you down for a CT and see if that aneurysm's grew any? Because if it has, I wouldn't do anything when I'm in there for the heart catheter. I would just get images, and then in the surgery, to fix your aneurysm, they would go ahead and do things then. So I went down for a CT, and when I came back up, yep, it had grown. So my aneurysm now was at 5.25. The cardiologist said that they would be talking about surgery, and so he was going to go ahead that day and do the heart catheter and get, he said before open heart surgery you had to have a heart catheter anyway. So he decided he was going to, go ahead and do that. And so I had the heart catheter. And as most of you know, during a heart catheter, you are awake, but you're, sort of not awake. Something's going on, but you're in, I was at least in and out. They had went through my wrist. And so as I was coming, when the heart catheter was over, the doctor was asking me how I was doing. And I wanted to answer. I kept trying to answer, but I couldn't say anything. And they kept saying, "Are you okay?" And, inside I'm screaming, "I'm okay," but nothing would come out. And so, I remember, the doctor saying, well, maybe it's the medicine, let's give her a little time. And they just kept asking me over and over if I was okay. And about that point, I started getting scared because I could not speak. I could make little sounds, but no words. And so, All of a sudden, instead of having like a nurse and a doctor around me, the whole room was full. My daughter had come in, my husband had come in, and my son, my dad was there. And just every time I saw somebody, I just kept getting upset because I couldn't talk. And I didn't like them seeing me that way. So they had started talking about I was having, possibly a stroke. And it was scary. It was real scary. So they decided to administer the TPA. At that point, my daughter and my husband had went back out in the waiting room where my dad and my son and his friends were at. And all of a sudden it come, over the speaker, stroke alert. And so they did administer the TPA and watched me for a smidge. And then they talked to this is from talking to my husband and my daughter, because I really don't remember. They talked to them. Well, I wasn't involved in the conversation. They talked to them and said, we, think she's having a stroke, and they wanted to take a look. And I did hear parts of it. I heard take a look. And so they, agreed. And so they wheeled me down to some other room. And, I thought they were going to do like an x-ray or, some sort of scan of my head to try to figure out where the stroke was at. But they started like, securing me down to this table, and I couldn't ask what was going on. I wanted to know what was going on, but I couldn't speak still. And, before long, I realized they're not taking a scan of my head. They're going into my head. So, I mean, they went through the groin, and they were, trying to find out where the blood clot was and all that. And so I could hear them talking, and I could hear them saying, oh, there it is. They saw it and everything. And I wasn't feeling good. And the nurse kept asking me how I was feeling. And I so wanted to, say, I can't talk. Quit asking me how I'm feeling. But I was starting to really feel nauseous. How you get that warm sensation right before you're going to throw up, and you start sort of sweating. Well, that was happening. And I couldn't tell them. And my head was, had a thing across it, had, me secured down so I wouldn't move my head. And I'm thinking, I'm going to throw up, but I can't tell nobody, and I'm not supposed to move my head. So anyway, the nurse noticed that I was sweating, and she says, oh, you're hot. And so she did a little cold rag across my head. And, for a minute that did help. But then that nauseousness come back. Well, all of a sudden I did throw up. And I don't know how many of y'all have thrown up with your head secured straight down. But I basically threw up in my eye. And let me tell you, it burns. To throw up in your eye is not a nice feeling. Long story short, they could not remove the clot. It was really tiny, and they said it was in like a branch or something that they really couldn't get to, but they were able to get medicine on it. I couldn't talk for, I'm going to say 3 or 4 days, but once it started coming back, I could talk. I don't know if y'all have picked up on it, but I do have a slight Southern accent. When I first started talking after the stroke, my accent was gone. It was the weirdest thing. I live in Ohio, and all of a sudden, I sounded like I live in Ohio. I was born in Georgia, but it just was weird. People, that I talk to daily it's weird. So anyway, they sent me to the surgeon again, the cardiac surgeon who scheduled the test. Oh, I forgot to say, the wedding was good, and we found out at the wedding I was having a granddaughter. So my daughter was with me when we went and saw the surgeon, and he said he wanted to do the surgery. It was time for me to have the surgery. And this was, I had the stroke late November, early December of 2018. When we saw the surgeon, he had said he wanted to do the surgery in February. February 11th was the day he picked, and it freaked me out. And we didn't see him until after the new year. We got through the holidays and all that stuff, and we wouldn't seen him. I want to say it was the beginning of February, and he said the 11th, and my grandbaby was due March 17th. And so I told him, couldn't we wait until after the baby was born? I wanted to be in the delivery room. And he said we could, but he preferred not to. And so I kicked it around some. And I thought if I didn't have the surgery before the baby was born, once I saw her, I don't know that you could have gotten me into an operating room, cut me open, and risk not making it once I saw and held my grandbaby. So we decided to go ahead for February 11th. So I went in, had before the surgery, I freaked out a little bit. Well, I freaked out a lot. I was definitely scared. I had to go have dental work to get approved for the surgery to make sure nothing was going on in my mouth. Well, there was, so I had to have a couple teeth pulled. I still have a spot that I need to have a bridge put in. But anyway, I had teeth pulled. I had people volunteer to go with me, but I thought I could handle it, so I went and had my teeth pulled. I was by myself. I sort of freaked out there too, had a panic attack after they had pulled one. And, my dad had kept saying he would drive me. And I'm like, no. But for some reason, after they pulled that first tooth, I just felt so alone and by myself. So that's one thing. If somebody offers to help you, let them help you. Because I wasn't alone. I never was alone, but there was a couple times I felt like it, and I shouldn't have. I should have let folks help me. Anyway, back to going and having the surgery. I went in the morning of, and, I had called the doctor the Friday before. I keep going back and forth, but I called the doctor the Friday before because I was freaking out. I had heard of the pump head, and he's like, well, that's if you're on bypass for a long time. He didn't anticipate I was going to be on bypass for a long time. I was concerned about waking up with the tube still being intubated. And he said, usually that's not the case. Normally, as soon as you start coming to, they take the tube out. So, he answered some questions. I called my family doctor because just hearing him tell me, Kath, you're going to be okay, made me feel better. So anyway, Monday morning we went in to have the surgery. It was still a lot. I had, my daughter, my husband, my son. There was other relatives there. My dad, my brother. My other brother come up later. And like I said, some friends and some family members from my daughter's new family from when she got married. So, the waiting room, I had some cheering, that's for sure. I had some people out there rooting me on. So, I had the surgery, and when I come to, let me back up. I had what's called the Bentonal procedure, and from what I understand, they replaced the root and the aorta. I got a graft, and they went with the tissue valve instead of the mechanical valve because of I do have a blood clotting issue, and that's why the stroke and everything. I've been on Coumadin since probably 15 years ago, but now they've moved me to Eliquis. But anyway, so when I come out of the surgery and woke up, of course, the breathing tube was not out. They were having problems with my oxygen. I wasn't keeping my levels good enough and everything. So I ended up having the tube in for 24 hours. And pain medicine makes me nauseous, so I was getting nauseous, and so they would do the suction to basically suck the stuff out of my stomach that, was making me feel nauseous and everything. But at one point, a nurse was messing with my machines, and she didn't notice that I was struggling. And I reached over to tap her, and she turned, and this was the only bad experience I really had in the hospital with my caregivers and everything, because they were all wonderful. But she turned and she's like, "You don't have to hit me." And I'm thinking, but I'm choking, because I'm trying to get sick with this tube down my throat. And she figured it out and she helped me. But so I stayed in the ICU for a couple extra days because of the breathing, or because being intubated and everything. And so let me think, what else? Everybody come and see me. I had visitors and everything, and I stayed in the hospital for 7 days. I knew I was forgetting something. I want to read to you what the bent all procedure is. It is a type of cardiac surgery involving graft replacement of the aortic valve, aortic root, and ascending aorta, with re-implementation of the coronary arteries into the graft. So from what I was told, it was a big surgery. He had said originally 6 to 8 hours. My family told me it was 9 hours. So after I, like I said, finally got the tube out, then I had to deal with, the pain. And, it wasn't as bad as I anticipated, considering, you're cut open. But it was not, it wasn't pleasant, but it wasn't horrible. So, I had to, let the nurses help me get in and out of bed. They used one of the belt harness things and stuff to help. They taught me, not to use my arms. Speaking of my arms, that was one thing too. When I first woke up, my right shoulder was very, very sore. And I was trying to sign language that to my daughter because it was so sore. And it took months. And my right shoulder still ain't quite right. From what I understand, they put my arms underneath me during the surgery, tucked them like underneath me. And so my right shoulder is sort of what I think they call it, like frozen. But I'm getting it back. It just has taken time. So when I went home from the hospital, I did originally go to my mom and dad's house. I went there because they had a lift chair, recliner, which I needed because you can't sleep flat or on your side at first. They also had a ranch, and my house is not a ranch. They had a stand-up shower too. So my pregnant daughter, she helped a lot. She helped shower me. Friends at my husband's work were wonderful. They had a chair, for the shower that they sent. They sent, food. My people I work with sent food. Friends sent food. I mean, it was great. Everybody was wonderful. When I first got home to my mom and dad's house, she had made a big old pot of vegetable soup, but, trying to eat it with the arm that's not working was tough, but it was delicious. So after, I'm going to say 3 or 4 days, I decided it's time to go to my house. And I still went over to my mom and dad's for like a week to shower instead of trying to go up the stairs at my house. And like I said, my daughter, she'd come over after work and help me. And, my son and his girlfriend, I didn't even mention while I was in the hospital, they, along with my husband, redid the floors and painted my house, the inside walls, so I could come home to a nice, pretty house, which was great. Anyway, so I'm trying to think, where was I at? I don't know. I got to think about what I was going to say next. Hold on a minute. I know what I was going to say. So, you know how I worried about not being in the delivery room when my grandbaby was born. Um, she came early, 17 days after I had open heart surgery. Um, my daughter went into labor, probably from helping give me showers and all that stuff. Um, I was in the delivery room. I struggled, but I was there. I didn't help much. I felt like they was having to worry about me more than her, but my grandbaby was born and she's just precious. And to be honest, she has helped me recover. I think without her, it might have took longer. So 17 days later, like I said, I had me a precious little grandbaby, Parker. I'm going to put a picture in this video, and I'm also going to put a picture of right after surgery and my scar. As you can see, my scar is still there. It's healing pretty good. I'm almost 10 months out now. So I don't really want it to go away. I'm proud of my scar. It's something I went through. Then 7 weeks after my surgery, this one's a hard one. My dad passed away. He, I just started cardiac rehab and everything. And exactly 7 weeks after my surgery, I get a phone call in the morning, and it's the paramedics at my mom's house, at my mom and dad's house, telling me he had passed away. So we dealt with all that. It's still obviously pretty tough. But I know he would want us all to be happy. He came to all my surgeries and all my procedures, and he was somebody who wanted me to get the surgery. He also knew that I was ready for great kids. So in a way, I think he watched me get through surgery. He watched Parker be born, and then he knew I'd be okay. So I don't think he could have left until he knew I would be okay. I'm going to pause for a minute. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So the point I think of this video is I made it through surgery. I made it through a stroke. I made it through the delivery of my grandbaby at 17 days. I am starting it's been a little bit. I'm starting to walk and exercise, and I've returned to work. I do telework some days, but for the most part, I made it. I still, like I said, my blood pressure is a little low at times. I don't know if I said that or not, but my blood pressure is a little low at times. My heart rate's a little low, so they are watching that. At one point, right after surgery, I was having AFib, but like I said, it's reversed, and now I'm having the lower heart rate. They did talk about possibly a pacemaker, but now I think things are starting to even on out. When I sleep at night, sometimes my heart rate will go pretty low. I wore a monitor a week or two ago, and haven't got the results of that yet. But I've decided, it's time to get out there and live. I go to the pumpkin patch with my grandbaby. I spend a lot of time with her. My son and his girlfriend are doing real well. So, maybe I'll have another grandbaby sometime soon. I just think it's, I was a little nervous at first because I still wasn't feeling great. I've been told it takes a year to really get over open heart surgery. And I believe that, but I'm coming up on 10 months. I saw my family doctor, about a week ago, and he asked me, Cathy, are you scared? Are you afraid to do things? Because I was telling him, sometimes I just, am not as active as I feel I should be at this point. And, I don't know if I'm scared or not. I don't think so, but um, he listened to my heart. He listened to it real close and everything. And he said, and he told me, and I believe it. He said, your heart is better than it's ever been. Um, get out there and do what you need to do. Well, I have enjoyed making this video. It, I think, has been nice to put everything I've been through in a little story. Sorry if it's taken too much time. I tried to make it shorter, but if I can do it, you can do it. It's rough, but not so bad. Always cross your arms when you sneeze. And I'm going to put some pictures to show you what I've been up to since the open heart surgery. You'll see I got back in the pool. Had to cover my scar, but I got back in the pool. I've done the pumpkin patch with my grandbaby. I might be slower, but I won't be for long because I'm going to get at it. I'm not scared. Like my doctor said, my heart's better than it's ever been. So, you all can do it too. I'm rooting for you. Everybody take care.